Today I'll be going through some of the sewing notions that you use and tools for basic sewing. There looks like a lot here, but I have a variety of each thing. First, you start with when you cut your pattern, you do not want to use your fabric scissors. You will dull them very quickly. So have a pair of household scissors to cut out the main pattern. Patterns are not only purchased at the store anymore with the tissue paper style, but you can also, most are PDF files that you purchase online, and you would print them on your printer and cut them out and put them together using the tape for the larger pieces. And they are thicker paper and more durable. And then what you would normally do is pin them down. I haven't used my pins in a very long time. So once I started using clips, I was just so happy not stabbing my fingers anymore that I never really went back to pins. In those patterns that a clip doesn't really work, I often will put the piece down and just trace it out using quite often a marker or a pen, but you have all these different ones. You have a friction pen. This is very popular right now, but it's used quite a bit for fabrics, but it's actually not made for fabric. When you use it on your fabric, it's fine if you're using like to outline your pattern or pieces that you're going to be hiding afterwards. But it apparently, once it vanishes, will come back in extreme cold. So if you're making like a bag and you put markings, the markings go away, you take your bag outside and it's wintertime, those markings will show up. So that's not something you want, but there's still a use for those. Quite often I'll use permanent marker, especially if I'm working with leather. I just want something outlined that I know I'm cutting off. This particularly is for leather. It just shows up nicely on dark leather. It doesn't really look like even a ballpoint pen. It's just, I don't know, amazing. It works well. But that's particularly for leather. The white pencil crayons work well, but I use these three a lot. One vanishes with water, one just vanishes with time. Not sure. Yeah, fast fade. And trust me, it's a really fast fade quite often before I get to sewing the product. And then this is chalk, which is quite nice too. You just use another piece of fabric and rub the chalk out. One thing you'll find with rulers, if you do not buy properly, as in nice quality, you will find that quite often one ruler does not measure up to the next. In this case, all mine measure up nice, but sometimes the cheaper tapes, they stretch over time, depending on what they're made out of, and it distorts the numbers. Or sometimes if you get knockoff name brands, they're just made very cheaply and the numbers don't match up. So if you're using multiple measuring tapes or rulers in your project, just make sure that the numbers all coordinate. You really, depending on what you're making, if you're a new beginner, you don't really need these kind of rulers or the rotary cutter that goes with them or the mat underneath. It's quite often what quilters use or experienced sewers. I never had these for many, many years, but they come in incredibly handy, especially if you don't want to be marking up your tables with these mats. These are self-healing, so you can use them over and over and over again. These are always handy when you're hemming, making small seams. You'll always want, I have a variety of everything here because I sew in 3 different places, whether I'm cutting in one place, assembling in another, sewing in another. Fray check will be your friend. Make sure you have that. Basically, when you cut something in a seam, to cut your seam down, and you're scared it's going to fray, you just put some of that. It's like gluing it, and it won't fray and come out. Bobbins are not created equally, just like measuring tapes. Be careful what you buy. Some machines take the metal, some the plastic, but even the plastic ones, if you line them all up, you'll find some dome a little bit more. If you're having problems where your threads breaking a lot or catching up, quite often it can be your bobbin or your needle. Just change that. Your thread, get good quality thread always. So if you're working a lot with cottons, get a cotton thread. This particularly is for quilting. This is polyester. I usually always had black and white, in polyester, and in cotton and grays, because they're good standards. And then I would just buy a spool of matching thread for whatever project I was doing in case I wanted to top stitch. And most of my assembly work would always be black, white, or gray. This is bonded nylon. In my domestic machine, this is a text, I think they call it text 40 or 30. Anything much higher I can use in the top but not in the bobbin case. But this is great for leathers and vinyls and whatnot. It's very strong and durable. Needles, it all depends on what you're sewing. Something like the ballpoint, that's what you'd use on jersey knits, t-shirt material. That way it does have a little ball type shape on the bottom so it doesn't slice through and cut your fabric as it goes through. A standard needle, it's sharp and so it's going to cut through. This is what you want for cottons. These are just heavier weight needles, particularly jeans and leathers, any heavy fabrics. There's also numbers. The higher the number, I think it's the thicker the needle. Basically, the higher number you can use more layers of fabric or thicker fabrics. If you're just doing something simple where you're often sewing 2 layers of cotton, a number 11 is sufficient. Something that's not here as well that you'll want for your machine. I have used it on every machine since I began to sew. It's a walking foot, and it just helps your fabric pass through your machine easily. I now have a built-in one that I can flip up if I don't use, but I never flip it up. Get a good seam ripper. This is just to cut my thread separate from my fabric cutting. It's just a quick little access for when I want to trim my threads. Anytime you're lacing, I don't use safety pins very often, but if you're lacing something or stringing elastics, you need one to fit through your casing that you make. And also a regular sewing needle for when you're doing hidden stitch and just closing up openings that you don't want seen. Sometimes if you're turning, you want to get a nice pointy corner. Chopsticks also work. Anything that will fit into the corner works really well. So there are some of the notions that I use. And with my cup of coffee or tea beside me, this is what I use to get going. Have a great day.